great work, Devon. I really like the proportions, the way certain sections reference each other. I think that this is excellent work. It seems like like a lot of the things that you put into this are almost anticipating all of my belly aching that I have been just handing out to everybody. Now, having said that, there is absolutely, I can absolutely help you with this score and give you a few pointers. It's kind of interesting. I've been sort of saying over and over again, don't score harp in a big tutti. And right here, like if the strings were not playing pizzicato here, then I think that the harp would actually have a chance at fortissimo with a bigger roll, right? But anyways, I think right in here the harp is pretty much superfluous. Now this is kind of interesting right in here, this opposite direction to the accompaniment figure, right? I think that works really nicely actually because you are playing pitches that aren't being covered, right? So like the pizzicato, there will be a slight interference. You can even hear that in the mock-up as well. There will be like the strength of the pizzicato will interfere to a certain degree with the attack of the pluck in the harp, but there will still be you will still kind of hear these lines going in contrary motion to one another. I would just say mark the harp fortissimo here to the forte of the pizzicato, and then there's a chance, right? So there are a couple of other little scoring concerns. Like here, you got the E flat clarinet under the B flat clarinet, so it should really be over. And I realize that might be influenced by thinking that, well, this is the auxiliary clarinet player, so they should really go down there. But when you do this, you are giving the score reader, excuse me, it's 6 in the morning over here in New Zealand. So you're giving the score reader the idea that maybe, is this an alto clarinet maybe in E flat because it's below the B flat clarinets, right? So, and I know that that's not what you intend. So just really flip the position of these. If you're going to have your piccolo over your flute players, right, this being a third player, then you should really have your E flat clarinet over your B flat clarinet. And maybe that's something you couldn't control in the score layout. There are a few other little points. One is this. A man after my own heart, you have marked the letter O rather than the harmonic circle under these open these open E's. Okay, and that's perfectly fine. But I don't think you need to say it over and over again, and you might not even have to say it at all, right? Because generally speaking, the players will opt to have an open string when they're playing pizzicato. At least that would have been my approach as a viola player. And then, like, I'm right here. I'm just trying to think, hitting high C, like doubling D, and then I'm just thinking of like where my other finger would be. So yeah, so this is possible. It's a little weird because the fingers are going to be arching over these open strings in the middle, the A and the D string, and then you're going to have this finger right here in fourth position on the G string, and then this one is going to be just like one step higher on the E string. So it's weird, but it does work. So good for you for working that out. And then, of course, this is real easy. The cellist can just bar the bottom two strings. Okay, so those are just a few scoring notes, and there might be one or two other things Oh yeah, yeah. There's this one last little thing. So look, don't assume that you're making something easy for the players by enharmonically spelling out a double sharp, right? This note here is F double sharp here in the grace note. That is an F double sharp. It is not a G natural, and it is better to write it out as an F double sharp. And just in general, try to get into that habit. It doesn't make a huge amount of difference to a wind player, but for a string player, where one finger follows the next in order in their fingering, when you write, say, a G natural and then a G sharp, what the player will do is they will slide their finger back and forth, right? So, rather than just stepping to the next, because that's just the approach, right? So don't make it easy. You're making it hard, right? This is an F double sharp. Score it as such. All right. So now let's get down to the nitty gritty of evaluating this score according to the criteria. All right, which I'm just finding very, very useful. It's making this whole process half as difficult as it was in previous years. So, first concern, pitch weight in the upper middle register of the orchestra. And, it's interesting that, like, you do kind of stick with that those higher pitches at the beginning, and then you start to fill out the sound picture as you go. So that is great. So you are using that that restricted area of pitches at the beginning, and then you are building on it with a broader range going forwards. So that's excellent. So not a concern, right? Or you have ticked that box. Okay, thematic material repeats often, possibly sounding repetitive if orchestrated exactly the same way throughout. Now here, we see that you have, built on this as well. Like you are adding these lower pitches in here, timpani stroke, more percussion, and it is enough, and also the piccolo on top. So all of that helps to build a slightly bigger sound. I would say especially the timpani and the cellos. I don't think you need to be pianissimo here. I think it can just be forte with everybody else, or mezzo forte. And the same thing with the snare drum and the tambourine. I think that can be a little louder. Also, just, cymbal and triangle, you're really burying them, right? Let's talk about how this is orchestrated, okay? So the pizzicato supporting these other pitches here, very, very glad that you're not doing a tied grace note, like B to B, right? So you are thinking ahead and avoiding that trap. So that's fine. This is just a little weird, jumping up here and in doing this kind of higher. I mean, it's totally possible. I'm not sure how beautiful it sounds. It's going to sound a little, kind of a little tremulous, a little squawky, and it's just very, very short. It's just like a very, kind of a note. So it's not the most beautiful thing in the world, but it'll work if that's what you want, but it might not be the, it's like I'm sort of wondering on what other, could this note here, could this line here be, and then jumping up to do the little grace note to A, if that could have just been played by English horn, which has got way more control over that same area, right? All right, but you've got about the only thing that I would say that is a little dicey here is that the little melodic fragment here is very like at first it's really quite it's kind of quite underpowered, and I would say like the same thing is true of the actual melody. So it's just being played by first flute, and then you have all of these other instruments that are supporting, But like we've got like but really at pitch we really just have the first violins playing that same B, right? So and here you trade off to oboe. Okay, that's fine. But I mean, I just feel that there needs to be a little more strength in the melody here. So I'm not sure where you would get that from, the way that you've scored everything out. But that would be my only concern here, is that maybe the melody was a little underscored. Now here, this is great. So you're bringing in piccolo, and that helps a little. I still feel it's still a little underpowered. These clarinets are like kind of not doing anything. Could one of them be playing at an octave below to sort of reinforce it a little bit? Even here as well, making that a triple octave. It might be something that would just help to firm up the overall conception. Now, going on to the next two 4-bar sections, melodic development soaring quite high to the uppermost orchestral register. That's one of the concerns. And then the other one is accompaniment figures covering a wide range of pitches and wind registers if you were to use winds. And I really love the way that you've scored this. Yeah. I think you should avoid dynamic mixing, though, right? So you've got forte in your piccolo and oboe, and bassoons and strings, and harp. The harp once again, harp should be fortissimo, and then it's got a chance here. Then you've got mezzo forte in your A2 clarinets. You might as well just have a single clarinet and have forte, right? And then right here you've got E flat clarinet just blasting away. What if instead of fortissimo you just had nuances? Just threw in some dynamic arcs, so that would help the E flat clarinet to stand out, and it wouldn't have to just suddenly be this massive. Because what you're asking here is going to make the E flat clarinet really penetrate. It just hugely penetrate in practice. Like what the mock-up is lying to you here. It will really be loud. So I would say forte with crescendo is better. Ba 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 da 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 diminuendo, and then crescendo again. Yeah da 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 da, and then diminuendo at the end. I think would work really well. And what is going on there? There is a crescendo here written into the piano score, right? Okay, so I would just say add nuances, keep this at forte, and you could even write solo over there, and then that takes care of that problem. Then, right in here we have got. It's really rather fun. The piccolo coming in here to double this line, and I love the way that you drop down here to meet up with the oboe to double the oboe, and that helps to stabilize this. This right in here helps to stabilize the E flat clarinet as the piccolo comes in and takes over on top. That's beautiful scoring. It's really wonderfully done. Okay, now going ahead to the continuing on. So, I've noticed looking at the general drift of scores. I've noticed that there's a tendency to kind of underscore right here in terms of the accompaniment, and your accompaniment is doing fine, but what happens here in the piano score? There is no more accompaniment below, right? It just becomes this mad dash running up to the high E. And I feel that is an integral part of the music. The accompaniment ends here very emphatically. Ba 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 da pow. Right? So it really like it is it's kind of ending the syncopations, right, that are built into the music. Right? Because I think this also weakens when you're putting in too much of the accompaniment, I think it weakens the staggered phrasing of the next section, right? Where the rhythmic phrasing starts on the second beat and goes and ends on the first beat of the next bar, right? So when this is thrown in here, it becomes too regular, and then this kind of this rhythmically ambiguous section right in here. It's ambiguous in terms because like it isn't paced, right? There isn't any, like, once you hit the downbeat here, it just runs away, and if there were a meter change in there, you wouldn't know it, right? There would be nothing to emphasize the metric change. So I would say really maybe rethink this. And okay, one more little tip here about notation. You don't need to do this. This kind of incomplete tie thing. It's hell to read. I mean, I'm looking at it. I'm looking at these parts as a violist and a violinist and just thinking, I would not want to read that in my part. I am not going to be stopping. I'm not going to be dampening the strings of my pizzicato. I'm not going to be sort of saying, oh, well, I played these strings. I don't want them to keep vibrating, so I'm going to put my hand down on my fingerboard and then stop them from. So I think that there's just no point, right? And like right here, like this doesn't make any sense, right? Here you're asking for an open E, right? And then you want it to keep sort of, you want the sort of let vibrate effect of the incomplete tie, but then you're asking the player to play up a fifth on the same string. So how does that make sense, right? So this is an affectation. Just don't, for at least for how you're applying it here, just leave it out. All right, leave out all of this stuff. And I'd say that there's a particular urgency to some of this advice because I really feel that this is a score that is really close to being ready for the stands, right? So this is something that you can absolutely, I think that with a little bit of fixing up, this could easily be performed. All right. So, and all the more reason for you to get rid of some, you do not need the open string notation, and maybe just put it right at the beginning, and then people get the idea. Oh yeah, whenever there's an open string, we'll just prefer that. But like that goes without saying, right? I would want to pluck my open string more than I would want to pluck a fingered string if in a situation like this where I want it to come out of the texture, right? Another kind of interesting thing overall, which I'll comment on before going on, is that I love how you are getting a nice full effect with forte at the beginning rather than fortissimo. You're sort of bringing it back into that to the macrocosm of forte, right? Rather than what is essentially a microcosm of fortissimo, right? Forte has all this flex to it. It's this big dynamic world, right? Of inflection that you can move around inside, right? It is not this one fixed position on a ladder. Forte should have worlds within it, right? Of inflection, accents, articulations, all these other ways of being inside forte, where you don't need to go to fortissimo. You do not need to sit around at mezzo forte, which is just kind of a grayish color for a lot of instruments. So, so I love the way that you're using forte here, okay? And then you could just continue to do that. A single clarinet played forte, not mezzo forte. Forte here, solo, and throw in some nuances, right? Especially a crescendo here and then a diminuendo at the end. And that should be universal across your melody instruments. Okay, so now, so we're getting to here, and just the question is like, continuing on, right? It's a very weird balance, and I see what you're trying to do here, but it's still not going to work. Like you want a piano trumpet part, and you want a forte flute part, Okay, and really just the until the flute part pulls away right here, it is just not going to, you are not going to hear it at all, right? So like unless you really control the colors, the thing is this is going so fast, right? And there's such a specific momentum to the music that I don't think that this is going to work very well. Now, if this were like oboe, right? If this were a first oboe thing and it was being combined with the trumpet, then I would say okay, that works. And then here, this is interesting how you're going diminuendo. One last thing about this: this should be a first trumpet part, right? Don't don't assume that the second player has got the chops of the first. I mean, you can assume that in a situation where the orchestra is top notch professionals, or even a really good regional city orchestra, that kind of a thing. Even good semi-pro orchestras, you can have equally good trumpet players. You can even have a better second trumpet player than first trumpet player, because it's just that might be some guy who plays, like you'll have a regional where the first trumpet player is pretty damn good, and then the second trumpet player is somebody who gets called in from the major orchestra, the internationally acclaimed orchestra that's got the recording contract, and he might be the second player for that orchestra who's just coming in to fill in, and they might be really way better than the first, but there's no way that they're going to put them on first because that's an insult to the first player, right? And the first player might actually have been the previous teacher of this second player for the bigger orchestra, right? So that those are situations in which, the second player might be as good or better than the first. But you cannot count on that, right? And you cannot count on this score being performed in its first performance by a top-notch orchestra. So you have to just, assume that the responsibility of playing a solo should really rest with the first player as much as possible. And so this is a first trumpet part, okay? An exposed solo. So I just think that this is perilous. That is just what I'm going to say, is that combining the flute with the trumpet right in here. I really love I love the intention here. Having the E flat clarinet above and then the trumpet mixed with the flute below. And like this will work, like the higher you get, the better it works, but then the lower you get, like, from B to D and then coming back down, it just, like, it really will, even at piano, it'll be more about the trumpet, right? So, but look, I mean, you can always try it out and see how it works. Some players will just really be listening to each other and they'll make it work somehow, right? But it's just like instinctively, it's something that I wouldn't feel an impulse to do. And then this is just so cool in here. So you are really thinking about the that whole question of the melodic development soaring quite high. So, like, all right, this is sort of reminding me of, just all of a sudden I had flashed on this one time. I think it was a couple of challenges ago. I was going over some concern like this, and I think I sort of hurt the feelings of the person who I was evaluating, that I as if they had not thought about it, right? When I was praising them for having thought about it. So, like, there's no ego involved here. All right, all I'm trying to do is fix the score. I am not commenting on anybody's abilities or rightness or greatness or anything like that. I am your humble servant here. I am your car mechanic. I'm not your schoolmaster. So I just feel that this is just beautifully done, with the piccolo running way up to E, and then right here the flute dropping from its last completely perfectly in control note down to G, and then running up, and then joining the oboe, and then here your E flat clarinet also drops down a little bit, like, and it's staggered so that you don't really hear that the break in the line. and that's all doubling the first violin's rushing up, right? So here's the thing: is that if you don't need to throw in the accompaniment here, then guess what you got? You've got an extra, you've got an extra couple of possible melody instruments here that you could use to thicken this line as it rises, and you might need them, right? So I'd say my advice would be, cut the bassoon, cut this, like you can hit the downbeat here, but cut this, add, and actually just make this all about first voice. So first voice goes to the first violin, second voice goes to the seconds, and maybe you can even firm up some of it with violas from below if you feel the need to. All right, and then I really love the way that this is scored. This is the first point in this arrangement at which you are throwing in a firm, emphatic tutti, right? Just really just using everybody to their strongest extent and in the strongest registers, which is cool. Yeah. And I feel it's fairly well scored. And you're also exercising that phrasing, starting on the 2, ending on the 1. So we're rushing up towards here. This 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and 1. So just really beautifully scored across this. And about the only thing that I would say in here that you could possibly tinker with is whether or not you want a trade-off of texture more than you've got. Like right in here, you've got E flat clarinet plus flutes and piccolo, and then here you jump in with oboes plus flutes and piccolo and so on. So it's a very similar timbre going across with the violins supporting. Is there a possible way for you to also tinker with the accompaniment right in here, so that this lower line and the oboes can be doubled by the seconds? I feel that would just make things stronger. Just like have the seconds doubling the firsts in octaves all the way down. I think that would make things, especially if you want more weight in here. But I mean, you mean, having said that, like looking at the horns and the trumpets, you do have a trade-off in the texture of the melody just because of that, right? Even though you're sort of sticking to the same strategy with the winds and the strings, just throwing in the brass right here at the end just kind of gives it a bit of weight, and and then of course this this ripping upwards. And you're saying gliss. I would say watch out with this. I would say don't write glissando here. Just have this notated the way it is, and then go glissando here, because I think otherwise you're overusing this. Right? It's kind of like how many raspberries, right, can you put into a piece before people really start to notice, saying, wow, raspberries. There were a lot of raspberries in that piece, and there were only 2, right? So I think using it once is delightful. Using it twice, so I just make this notated. It's perfectly fine notated. There might be a slight glissando effect as the player is kind of moving quickly through the slide positions, but they can still finesse the individual pitches, and I think that the way that you got it scored is better, right, than just doing a gliss like this. And you never know, unless you are a trombonist. The trombonist may want to change the position of something, right? Like just so that they end up on a more secure note. Like you might have them like glissandoing up to a particular pitch that isn't really good in the position that they started, right? And then you say gliss over it and they're stuck, right? If they obey your command. All right, so, but, other than all those caveats, I think it's pretty well scored. I'm just kind of looking through it for any weirdness, and yet, I mean, it just feels very nice. Yeah. Okay. Now we get to here. Yep. Okay. Our final concern is maintaining a driving staccato, transitioning smoothly to the next passage, and you do pay that off. But there is one little thing, and that is I think you can write molto marcato here, just like it is in the piano part. And you can also put back in the crescendo and then the little dash diminuendo, because that is really part of the music. If you're listening to the way that pianists interpret this, they obey Falla's direction to crescendo, and then they're all putting in this little diminuendo in here, which is why I have the dash diminuendo. But you can make that just a real diminuendo. So I think that putting the flex back in here is really important. Okay, and then you can go to a new dynamic here, right? And in the the template score, I suggested like poco forte. What could that be, like maybe mezzo forte or mezzo piano or something like that. So you could just really bring it back a bit if you wanted to. And I feel that even though you are kind of sort of suggesting that lighter texture, you're suggesting the softer dynamic through the lighter texture, I still think you need to end up there. You need to take the orchestra there. You can't just count on them, right? And I think some relief to the ear is really important as well. So think about that: crescendo, diminuendo to mezzo forte, right? And here you got mezzo piano in your timpani anyway, right? So maybe there's a way of just bringing down the volume a little bit so that the whole thing doesn't feel hysterical, right? Like, the whole question of relentlessness, right? If there's no relief to the ear in certain passages. Yeah, so got cellos and bass clarinets and staccato, and then this kind of stuff going on in the bassoons and the bassoon family, the double bass, and so on. I feel that's all really powerful, just very nicely done. But the only thing that I'm really kind of worried about is is there enough pressure on the melody here, right? You've got so much divisi going on. You might be better off here just having your second violins playing the intervals as their function, and then the first violins playing the melody as their function. So you get a very direct sound, rather than doing this kind of split it up between the two groups kind of a thing. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I like the way how you work the little yep into the dun 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 yep dun 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 dun. That's really fun. Just like the left hand leaping over the right and hitting that high E in the piano score. Yeah, I mean, very nice. Right, and then that same thing. So here in this section, we are getting to some some concerns that are in the evaluation criteria: contrast of color, breadth of texture. You've got that in spades. I love the way that really is kind of fully orchestrated for trading off and all those other things. So I think that's very, very nice. Maintaining differentiated roles and closely spaced melodies, overlapping accompaniment figures, highlighting inner voices. You doing that as well, right? So so all right. So note. All right. So there have been a few recent entries where the hands, like the trading off of the hands, was taken to be a trading off of the instruments, right? But notice how, in this case, Devon is just treating the line as one continuous line for the cellos, right? So I feel that that is the strongest way to approach this. And then like you're adding a little thickening here from your violas as the bassoons get higher. See, like, it's just some lovely ideas. And then the bass clarinet comes in here in a sort of a cooler doubling. Yeah, so neat ideas. A little trumpet going pow with the oboes. And then, yeah, and I mean, it's good, right? But like, what could really make this, right? So assume that this is mezzo forte at the beginning. Yeah, ba 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 da 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 dun. How about a little bit of flexing right in here, and then another flex on the solo. Right, and then the same thing here. Ba 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 bum. You'd have a little bit of a push right there in the middle. And I just love this low tuba right in here, kind of stomping on the double bass and so on. Yeah, just so fun, right? So all right, so low oboes, first clarinet, horns, or first and second horn. The just kind of a comment that like your harmonization of horn parts is a little backwards, right? The upper middle part should go to the third horn, and the lower middle part should go to the second horn, right? So don't go back over your entire score and just say, oh, okay, well, this will be like first and third, and that'll be second and fourth. Just rewrite it, okay? And then here, this is good, because first and second should be playing octaves together, right? And that is really what they're there for. And then the third and fourth should be playing their own little harmonic intervals to stay in tune with each other. But then right in here, once again, it should be the like in a little phrase like this, right? It really should be the this should be the third part. The lower part should be the third part, and the upper part here should be the second part. And then here, I would say I would want the third, just on this kind of stronger, more emphatic playing right in here. I would want the first and the third to be playing this. So basically, you'd have the same intervals, right? The E and the G sharp, and then the D sharp and the G sharp, and so on, and going to the F and the A. That would be in both parts, right? So you would have the first and the third playing the top parts, and the second and the fourth playing the bottom parts. So just rewrite that, okay? And yeah, and then just like adding the trombones and this rip right in here and the bass trombone. It's all really fun. And I feel that this works good in this context, but you just have got to, you just have to be careful, like in terms of how you are doling out your dynamics. It's very sparse in the dynamics department. Like here you're at the beginning of a major section, and we don't even know if there is a difference between the dynamics that happened before, right? So there's kind of no context here. So it's like a sentence that is missing a capital letter and then a period at the end. I don't know where things start and where things begin, right? And what are their relationships to one another. So here, I would say mezzo forte to begin, kind of a new thing, and then this should be mezzo piano, the brass, and then here that so here, like if you assume a push in here, like starting off with this little guy being kind of mezzo forte-ish and then having a crescendo, then that would make this forte, right? These little punches, but this should still be mezzo forte, right? And then here, I would say you want things to come in and be more emphatic, so assign forte dynamics to your winds and strings, and then mezzo forte to these other parts, but still have them all push into a crescendo together, right? So and then back off. So I think you can fix this all. So yeah, here, I mean, is there some way of like having the line be continuous and not just that sort of trade off between hands. That would be really, really good. But I really love the idea of the. I mean, I love the idea of the bass, or the, excuse me, the second clarinet, and then the English horn finishing up, and then like cutting the pizzicato. I think that that's nice. And then we get into this section here. So, like, once again, you've got some new context to some parts, but sort of sparse on the, for all I know, this is still forte, right? Right. So there, and what's going, and same thing with with the wind parts, right? What was the last thing we saw with the winds? Like, was forte back here? Forte, sforzando, crescendo, and then we have a couple of mezzo fortes here. But what's the context of this, like, new part right in here? All right. Well, right in here, we kind of run into the first more serious problem, right? Like, so far you have kind of skated through, and there's been a few balance things and maybe some stray missing dynamics and some other little notation things that I could help you with, but basically fairly solid. But right in here, I think you run into your first real problem, and that is keeping the triplets from overwhelming the melodic line above, right? And the problem is that there kind of isn't a melodic line, right? So I'm not really hearing the, dun 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 dun. I'm seeing some fragments of the melodic line, like here, this dun dun dun. You got this in here. And then you got here we've got the sounding E's in the horns, but like they just sort of die off almost immediately, right? So, but what does it say in the actual score? Like after a couple of accents at the beginning, B, he tells you to play tenuto on the second one, and then after that, like he ends on a tenuto after the dun dun dun, right? He just really wants a tenuto kind of approach, right? And then then later on in the score, you can see that like it gets tenuto again more in the. So it really should be tenuto all the way through. I think it's just it's just a piano thing, but you can translate to the music in being more regular. Okay, so I think it's really easy to rewrite, right? But it just you have to just give more respect, more weight to the melody in here. And we also have like right in here, you're really relying on your harp a lot, right? Da-da-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum. So don't go to the da-da-dum yet in the harp, right? Because this right in here is a completion of the melodic phrase, right? It is not a separate concern. Yeah, but da 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 da, and then a lot of people make the mistake of going yeah da 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 B. Right, so like it should be yeah da 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 but right. That is actually where the line is going. The problem is it's sort of obscured by the way the piano is scored. Right, so this should end with ya da da dum. Right, so this note here, this so it's like maybe you could change that around. Maybe the English horn could play the ya da da dum, and like maybe one of the clarinets or the bass clarinet could play the sounding B. All right. So if you want this to work, then it has to be very, very soft for the harp to be heard, especially these low notes in the harp. The lower you get on the harp, the more, the less that it really projects over the rest of the sound of the orchestra, right? And you really have to mark the harp up. This would have to be marked forte, or just and have lots of like inflections in it, like just really bringing it out and so on. So, I mean, I understand it's an extremely delicate section, right? And you've got very softly scored percussion parts, but I don't really know what you intend to do here, so I can't really give you all the advice that you need because of the dynamics, lack of dynamic parts, right? So somehow though the melody needs to stand out enough so that it has some kind of function right in here. And that, so you would have to have at least, I guess, horn, right? Would have to be the melody instrument, or it could be clarinet, right? Why does it have to be horn? Maybe the horn could be kept in the background, but you could bring in the melody line. B E da da dun would be written F sharp, but E would be the sounding pitch. Right? But just that, yeah, the melody is just really underpowered to the point of almost non-existence, right? So you have to rethink this passage a bit. But other than that, it's a bunch of easy fixes, right? You just make sure that you have the dynamics marked and so on, and here you're sort of trading off between the parts. There's really nothing, I think that just for like here you want this overlapping effect, right? Where one of them steps on the toes of the other one, and that's fine. It's very fiddly looking, but it's totally playable. You want this it's just some 70s vocals, backup vocals are sort of mixed like that. So yeah, I think it's all workable. I don't know if you really need to double this down here. I think it's just fiddly. Just save your bassoonist some hassle, right? Because you've got enough strength there in your contrabassoon. And and if you were going to be flexing the melody, you should flex everybody, right? So bum 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 bum. The texture needs to push into this high note, right? And wherever it happens, right? All right, and then we have this section right in here. And to a degree, you are keeping up with the Allargando expansion, right? And kind of holding on to the pitches as you go up. I think that you could have even more. I think you could keep it more consistent going all the way through, especially like on the last few pitches, right? Like, yeah, like for instance, I think this D right in here could be holding on in some instrument or other. I guess, yeah, you've got it in English horn. I don't know. It just feels. It feels like it's almost there in some ways, right? I'm just wondering if there's something more that could be done here to just have that feeling be more. And then there's the other issue here that you've got this sort of four soli kind of idea right in here, and I see what you're trying to do. You want to have an extremely light texture going on, but what if you withheld that for later on? What if you had the whole string section, all the players pushing forward alongside the winds, and then released into something where you would have like four players. Because I feel that, I mean, and I see what you're trying to do here. Just I totally can see the whole idea of like making sure that the harp isn't overwhelmed, right? But you can also have like the way that you handle that is you don't have the apex of the dynamic arc right here. You have it before, right? Right where Falla has put it. He's put the sforzando on the last eighth note, right? So these could all be pushing towards that. Ya ba 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 bum, and then release. Ya da 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 dum, right? And at that point you could, the harp would still come through because you could have the sforzando here and then down to I would say like you've already, for wanting to be able to balance it, you've already overbalanced things by having these triple stops, quadruple stops, rolled pizzicato in the violins, and then mezzo piano in the harp, right? This should be forte in the harp, and you should ease off on this rolled pizzicato because otherwise nobody is going to hear the harp, right? So you could just, with the way that this is scored, you just leave the harp out and then come in here, right? And the harp will be just as inaudible either way, right? Whether you play it or not. So I would say, like, if you must stick with this strategy, just leave the harp out, or you could leave it in, but just know that it's not going to be that loud, even if you mark it forte. All right, and then this is all really cool. I love the idea of throwing in a harmonic here. But one thing that I would say is, just to make it easier for the harpist, just have this note played with the left hand, and then have the B flat and the A going back and forth between the right hand. And that way, the left hand can just be staying in the position where it is, like the palm is sitting on the node, and then the finger is plucking the string, and then the other hand can just be going blum 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 blum, or blum 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 ting bling blum blum ting. Because I mean, harmonics can be played fairly quickly with some practice, but it's, in a situation like this, it's just really, like, it's kind of a hassle to go, palm, set up the harmonic, and then reach over and play the A, and you probably would just have the harpist just playing this A with their right hand anyways, right? So, all right. And this is all very cool. Kind of throwing in the touch 4 node in this tie and so on. I just feel like this should be, like, if you don't intend this to be played portato, then these should be tied, right? You could tie and slur it if you wanted to. But I mean, I feel that if this is going to be a tie anyways, and you're just going to, like, the player is going to be playing the B flat, and then they're going to just touch the note and then let go. So I feel that that is a tie on the B flat, rather than a slur necessarily. I mean, I think that it is clear the way that it is, but it just makes me feel that you really want each pitch to be enunciated somehow, in some form of portato. And I don't think that that's what you intend. All right, and then, so, arg, I see. Right. Instead of having to put the number over this, you could just, you could just write in the note that you intend, and the root note and the touch 5 pitch over it, and that would really help out if you are working with an orchestra that is, like, say, community level, like a good community level orchestra or something like that. I mean, that's fairly clear, but it's just, why not put in why not just put in just be really clear about what you want here, notationally, rather than just like the diamond head with nothing under it. That's kind of more, I sort of think of that as more of like a, modernist string quartet kind of a thing, right? Yeah, I would put in the D below, and then so that it's obvious it's a touch 5 thing. And then, you might get into arguments with the player, and they say, oh, well, I could just do that lower on with a touch 4 interval and get a more secure sound. So, like, anyway, I mean, it's a beautiful, delicate kind of accompaniment. So, and you are doing a lot to, like, make it beautiful and special and everything else. So the only question is, like, is there any kind of variation you can introduce into it? Like maybe the harp moving around a little bit within it, or some other little touch to keep it from becoming too regular. Because, like, even within just like 8 bars, if the ear becomes accustomed to the rhythm, it just becomes motoristic, even though it's scored so beautifully, right? So that's just something to possibly consider. So now here we get to our solo. So if everybody's playing pianissimo, I think the oboe can be piano solo, right? It can sound very beautifully over the top, rather than being quite so hugely separated dynamically. And maybe it works better in the mock-up to have this forte, but I think piano solo is fine. If everybody else is playing pianissimo, and then add nuances, right? There are like no nuances in this part. So what is going on here expressively? But da 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 da, right? It's not just going da 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 bum 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 da da dum da 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 dum. No, it's going da 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 da. There is emotional weight in the way that the lines open out, right? And some of the slurring is pianistic, right? So like putting a slur over a slur. So just choose one or the other, right? Like maybe have the slur go from E to, or actually, just cut it entirely, right? So make these two separately enunciated notes and then slur from the E, I would say. Right, so yeah, and then is this portato? Could this be portato rather than just a row of tenuto marks that are each tongued separately? Right? Could it be more of a pulse? Right, that would be portato. And then there's a slur in the piano part. Dum. The way that you've got this score, the player will be going da 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 dum. Right, like there is. So watch out for the slurs, right? And then right in here in the piano part, this is also tenuto, right? So could this also be portato as well? Right. So study some wind parts, right? There's more to it. And then here at the end, you're going to A2 at the end of the solo, but like A2 for oboe is a loss of nuance, right? It isn't a thickening that's beautiful. It's rather it is something that becomes kind of clearer and more kind of less exquisite, right? And then right in here, if we look at the looking at the piano part, right? There's a diminuendo and stuff, but then you have this kind of repeat and the sort of echo in the English horn. I feel that there's energy like bottled up inside this. You know what I mean? So I think that you could easily go crescendo into this rather than diminuendo, right? And then the same thing here. Right? And here you're going flute, mezzo forte, right? So, yeah. And then, like, this is very similar to what happened before. Yeah. Right. And so does this mean the octave node? Right? So the before was the note at the fifth. This is the note at the octave. See, like, it's just really confusing. Score what you want. And then, like, right in here, I would say, if this is the octave node, then indicate the intended pitch in a regular note head with the circle over it, right? It's just getting too weird, okay? Just keep it as simple as possible. Yeah, and the little touches of horn right in there. Really, really nice. I mean, this is very similar to what happened before. And just like before, I would say, keep this in the right hand and then just allow the harpist to just continue to play these notes with the left hand only, right? And just like not tying up the left hand in this pattern. And and look, same remarks as the previous solo, right? Where are the nuances? Where's the flex? Where's the expression in this? But I mean, it's still very cool. One of the concerns I've been sort of avoiding going too far in the the evaluation criteria, but one of the concerns was careful treatment of the melodic voice to make it feel authentic to the composer's style. I mean, to a degree, it does feel like those solo instruments fit really nicely, and then the trading off, E flat clarinet, oboe. E flat clarinet wasn't a huge thing with Falla. Oboe, right? Okay, so in my like right at this part, speaking of the evaluation criteria, right here we get to the whole question of managing the sense of restraint leading to a burst of energy here, right? So, and that is why I scored the things the way that they were in the template, and I really think you should go back and check out what I did there, right? Poco rallentando, right, and then slower, right? So it's a bit of a release, right? Da 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 echo, and then poco animato da 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 and keeping going da 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 da. You see what I'm saying? So it's like the stuff that is in that template is there for a reason, right? Because it follows the wonderful calculations, right? The emotional calculations that were laid down by the earliest exponents of this work. Like, notably, I would say, like, the one who's influenced everybody's recording is Alicia de la Rocha, right? I mean, just listen to her. Like, forget about my template. Just go listen to her perform this part, right? And then we get to this part, rubato. That was something I put into the template. And then you bump da 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 dum. Notice the little, like in the template, the little parentheses fermatas, right? Those really do mean something, Da da dum bum 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 bum. Dun. There's a slight release here. Dun 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 bum 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 bum. All right, and a slight fermata on this rest, and then dun 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 dun. Right, so there's. The stuff that I put into the template really does like go back and check it out and see if there's something that's usable to kind of make to have this have more of a dramatic arc. So I would say aside all of that stuff, the orchestration here is pretty cool. I like the trumpets coming in here. It's very powerful with the flutes over the top. What possibly could be stronger here is like that the first flute is basically going to get absorbed into the sound, into overtones of the second trumpet, and the second flute is basically going to be buried by the trumpet, right? So what would make things stand out would be like a doubling the flute part, like having second flute play unison with the first flute A2 above, maybe having oboe double the trumpet line, and adding some violin right in there. We're not just stopping at the B flat, right? That could help this the flutes play more of a role than just basically just adding a tiny little bit of shine above. All right, and then if you're adding the oboe, right, to double right in here, then that makes sense for them to have a presence before. Yeah, and this is all nicely done. Bassoon, bass, and second clarinet, and the cellos and violas and stuff. That's all fine. And little E flat, it's very nice, right? And then just all of these middle winds. Now this is going to be intensely reedy. It just really is going to be a fat Russian sound. Just like where like the Russians would just pile wind upon wind upon wind on like the same pitch, and they just like loving that dark, rich, squashy sound. All right, and then all this stuff in here. This is nicely done. I like the combination of the horns and the strings in here. But once again, I'm just like not seeing any balance. Mezzo piano. What dynamic are the horns? Pianissimo, I hope, or piano, right? To balance with the strings. There are a lot of missing dynamics in here. As I said, it's sort of like missing the punctuation of a sentence, right? And then that in turn affects your mock-up, right? It just sort of gives you the wrong idea about what is the balanced where, right? If you're using your mock-up as reference. And then here, you know, I mean, it just doesn't. You can say fortissimo all you like here, but with English horn and A2 clarinets on the same pitches, the flutes just don't have a chance right in here. The flutes are too low, they're too soft to really contribute much. And look, if you've already got the clarinets, you've got that sort of slightly hooting sound, right? So you kind of don't even need the flutes right in there. Okay, and then this is all nicely done. With the little pizzicato at the bottom. All right, and so we get into this thing. Bum, 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 bum. And that's all nice. All right, so, and then just adding instruments and so on. What's in the actual piano score, though? Yeah, dun, 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 dun. Right, I put in the little dashed dynamics in there, which is what most pianists do. They sort of follow the arc of the melody in crescendo and diminuendo. Right, and then dun 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 da 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 boom. Right? So I think that instead of just making this a simple crescendo, really just follow the arc that is in the piano score. I think that is so much more powerful than just having a kind of a plain push like this. It's almost like this dynamic arc sort of makes me feel like you just want to get this over with and then get to the juicy part here, right? And then also, what's going on at the beginning of this? Dun 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 boom, right? It like ends up on a powerful note, and then you can pull back. Dun 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 dun. So like, really, just let this line finish, right? Instead of just going to a rest. It's like the end of the phrase is not on beat 4.5. It is on beat 1 of the next bar. So let it finish. Da 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 da, and then boom, and and then after that, forte piano, right, or forte pianissimo. Don't go ba. Just really let it end, or else the kind of exquisite pianissimo crescendo right in here is not going to really come through very well. So one thing that I think you could possibly try in here, rather than just saying pianissimo crescendo all the way through, is to just specifically terrace the dynamics, right? Just like pianissimo, da 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 da, piano, da 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 da, mezzo piano, da 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 da, then mezzo forte, yeah, da 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 da, and then crescendo at the end, right? I think that that's more effective than just like sticking a thing on it and saying crescendo all the way through, despite what it says in the piano score. I think that the orchestra needs more hands-on specific directions, rather than putting a big dashed line across 8 bars, which, by the way, can get to be a little confusing, can almost look like a bar line or get mixed up in some parts. I think if you have one instrument that is rolling one pitch all the way through, then yeah, pianissimo crescendo, that's fine. But I think terrace the dynamics. Right, and you could even have like pianissimo, then put a crescendo on this, then piano, and put a crescendo at the end of each. Like just put a crescendo at the end of each of these little 2-bar groups. Okay, so just as to the overall the overall orchestration of it, I think it's cool, like combining bassoons, trombones, and lower strings. I think that works really nice. And like in terms of the sort of hallucinatory feeling that is in the piano part, it's fairly nicely done. I would say I would say as you get forwards here a little bit, hold the brass back a teeny bit because you have, there are. I mean, like for instance, do you really need to go up to high G here? Do you really need to have octaves here in the trumpets? Right, doubling the violas and so on. I mean, you already have octaves in your clarinets, all right? Right, and then because this high G here, like let's assuming everybody's mezzo piano here, the high G will just really ring out, right? It'll be very, very bright. So maybe think about that, all right? And then like as things start to really coalesce and push forwards, you do start to be a little more careful about who gets what part. And I think that that's very, very cool. All right, and then we get to this sort of massive orchestration right in here. And yeah, the harp will just, unless you throw in some glissandos in here or something, the harp is just going to be invisible. So just leave it out. Let them stay on, on their little smartphones checking out Facebook, right? or whatever, or sort of, reading Better Homes and Gardens, or or thinking about how they're going to play the next part, right? So just let them be. Let them do what they need to do on tacits, because this might as well be a tacit. There's nothing, right? And as far as with expansion in the that is something that you need to put into the orchestration, right? That isn't something that each player needs to think about, right? Because I think otherwise you get like a almost hysterical kind of a sound. It's like, we're all going to expand now. No, just write it into the orchestration that it is expanding, right? Then I don't think the players really need to know the direction right in there. Because I don't think that it's, I don't think it really makes any difference, right? You can expand and contract the music just by, with like hairpins, or with just with the scoring and everything else. All right, so like once we get to the to this section, what is going on in the piano score? Da 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 dum, bum 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 bum, da 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 dum, bum 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 bum. So why is the tuba rock bottom the whole time, right? I think the tuba should be up and then drop, right? And the same thing with the contrabassoon. Contrabassoon should be doing what the double bass is doing. Because like there's no way, like the way that this is scored, I mean you can hear it in the mock-up, there really isn't a huge difference between the bass parts in here. They all kind of feel equally low because of the contrabassoon and the tuba doubling on the low parts all the time. Let's put that back in, all right? Put back in G da 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 dum, G da 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 dum, G da 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 dum, G da 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 dum. I think that's a very powerful thing in the music, right? Because then when you go to the ba da 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 dum on the next bar here, that's much more powerful than just having sat on the low G the entire time, right? Because the audience is expecting, you're going to jump up again, but now you're staying down and you're getting even a little lower, and where is this headed? Boom, right? Okay. So as to the overall orchestration right in here, once again, the second part is this D, and the third part is this F, right? So just more corrections that you need to put in, and do it the right way. I mean, that conductors appreciate it. I mean, look, working with a conductor who I love this guy. He's an awesome conductor, and he has championed my works. But once I had scored things out 1, 3, 2, 4, and and he got a little lost in that because of the atypical scoring, and he got kind of annoyed at it, and fair enough. He should have been annoyed, right? He felt that it wasn't clear enough. I felt that I had made it clear in the score, but then kind of looking back at it, I just realized, what was the use of going 1-3-2-4 in the score? There just wasn't any. There was no justification for it to begin with. So, I was just being annoying, right? And you are just being annoying here. So, not that you're not an annoying person, Devon. You're awesome, but like that is just something that you can get around. Don't stack your horns in order of pitch if you're doing 1-2-3-4, right? And in fact, you don't even need to say 1-2-3-4. If you're going to keep the same instruments in the same bars the entire time, you can just have, say, F horn period and not even have the numbers, right? But here it's nice that you do say 1, 2, and then 3, because that really does divide them up nicely. Okay. You're keeping your strings up. That's good. More or less in octaves. It's kind of hard to think, like, what role, how the violas are going to be audible doubling third trumpet, right? Like, who's going to hear that? Maybe, what, and then right in here, ba ba bum, they're playing that sort of B flat walk down right in there, and that's being doubled by the first clarinet. So that is a place where they can contribute something to it, except for the fact that that's also doubled by first horn. So who's going to hear that in the violas? I mean, it'll still contribute a little, but it won't be all that powerful. So is there something that the violas could do in here that would strengthen the overall string sound? And I would say yes, there is, and that is to, I think that it would be stronger if the violas were doubling the second violins right in here, right? And then they would just really be, they would be playing together, right? And then here they could go to this other part. Okay, so and where does this rallentando go? It actually goes back here, right? Not rather than here. So dun 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 dun, right? Rather than dun 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 dun. Do you see the difference there? Like if I put the rallentando back here, things are so much more emphatic and insane and everything else. And what were the what was the marking here? It was tenutos on everything, right? So put the tenutos back in. All right, here you got them just like on one bar here. Yeah, I think accents. Like I've been telling people to not have too many accents in their scores. Put them back in. Accents and tenutos. They really are important for the meaning right in here. All right. Bum, 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 bum. Everybody stops just dead on an eighth note. These should be eighth notes too. All right. So, what you have to remember is hitting these abrupt low notes, hitting the bass drum at triple forte and the timpani, and of course, all of the other stuff that's going on. We'll have this huge wash of reverb going through the hall of reverberation, right? And it will sit over the music well into halfway across this bar, if not further. And it'll be very hard to hear stuff, right? Because you're suddenly we are eclipsing the sound picture down very, very small, right? And I like the way that this is scored. I don't think you need to go fortissimo here. I think mezzo piano on your stopped horns, and then and then forte on everything else. And then and the pizzicato in there. That's really lovely. Okay. I don't know why you're delaying the first voice to go pizzicato. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. Just have these be the same length, and then just yeah. See, I think you're thinking that it's kind of hard to go from tremolo to pizzicato. Just have both players just end at the same time and go to pizzicato. They will just stop the pizzicato. They'll stop the tremolo in enough time to start doing the pizzicato. Don't you worry. Leave that to them. They will handle that. All right, and then here, this is just not possible to get the mezzo staccato. And it's like, because mezzo staccato it's a measured, almost of a pulse of a staccato, right? So like at this speed, it's just really kind of insane. Better to just go with straight staccato. Yeah, right? I think that's a better approach. So yeah, don't bother with the mezzo staccato thing. Right. So yeah, so forte across the board, mezzo forte. No, take it down to mezzo piano, and then but that still doesn't solve the problem of the reverberation of the hall, right? Just sort of washing over everything, and that is why I put a comma into my part right here, a pausa, right? Sort of, or a pause. So just a big comma or apostrophe mark, and then that just dun 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 dun. See what I'm saying? As opposed to da 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 ba, right? So just that slight pulling apart of the incidence of the notes there allows the reverb to sort of settle slightly, and also just the placement of the next note, right? It's almost like you're picking up where the note should be and putting it down gracefully, just a little bit ahead of where it should go. All right, and then yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's all fine. I don't think you need to go A2 on these pitches. I think just a single oboe is fine. Right. Yes, just so long as things are not too fast right in here. Because you're asking the players to go rather than See, the difference is rest rest. So it's just like getting that rest rest it's like it's just making sure that you come right in like on the one E and right. That is trickier than you think. Right, so it's almost better to have like the players going yata da yata da yata da yata da, and the other players going da 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 da. Right, it's just easier rather than this really split up kind of thing. And the same thing is true for the oboists. So just rethink this a little bit. Don't give these incredibly like things that look really simple on the face of it. When you've got two separate hands, you've got your left hand here and you've got your right hand just going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. But, it's not the same thing with the players going back and forth, right? Because just starting off the beat of the previous person is way trickier than you think it is, especially to get that pinpoint precision, right? So I would just say rethink this. This is better. This is a better approach than this. Way better. Okay. And now we're getting to this lovely ending section. And once again, you're bringing down your amount of players here for soli and so on. And then bringing in the harp and so on. So scoring the harp exactly the same way as the piano part is totally fine. And this is cool too. Like I've been commenting on people scoring this section out exactly the way that it is in the piano on the strings, and just sort of pointing out that means that these longer notes are going to sort of drag da 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 da. You know what I mean? But if you have the harp as the front, as the as the voice in the front, and you have these other players at pianissimo, then that's exactly the right balance. And then just this lovely, these solo strings right in here, these solo violins, soli. That's a beautiful kind of a thing. So, if harp is to be used, how to avoid regularity or predictability? Is there some way that the harp could be, changing octaves, doing some kind of thing in here so it isn't just the same thing for 10 bars, 11 bars? It's very cool the way that you're going to flats right in here instead of sharps. And, just giving us the very, very long, beautiful strings to be as resonant as possible. That's a very awesome idea. Worth stealing. Yeah. Could there be anything, like right here? I really like this conversation right in here. The English horn providing some contrast. Da, 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 dum. Ba, 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 da, dum. Could you jump back to another instrument here? Back to clarinet, or maybe, even bassoon. Ba, da, 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 dum. Right? So it's almost like, because this really sounds like like the first singer sings and the second person is saying, "Oh yeah, that really reminds me of that time when we were all young and innocent, and yeah, oh boy, those days have really passed." And then their sidekick says, "Yeah, they sure have," right? So maybe this should be a different instrument. Right? This needs to be, if this is Don Quixote, this needs to be Sancho Panza, right? And then bum 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 bum. This is all nice right in here. No, no problems. I would say you want a very, very soft sound, right? So I would say don't go a bassoons in their tenor register at pianissimo, right? Just have a single bassoonist, and then bring in the second bassoonist if you want this clash right in here. Yeah, and then clarinet. Yeah, da 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 dum, da da dum, bum 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 bum, da da dum, da da dum. This is really, really nice. Violas in here, and the way that the French horns are working with the second violins. That's lovely. Right, and then bum bum bum. Could there be any harp in here? I like the idea of the antique cymbals and a little bit of triangle. Watch out about trill triangle though, because it sounds a little bit like a phone going off. Like phone ringing. Yeah. Yeah, this all works fine. Also, could harmonics have played a role here at all in the strings? So, just things to think about. Could this have been played with flute harmonics, right? Or, same thing back here. Could some of this have been played with flute harmonics to make it sort of very distant and pale and cold? Hang on. Right. To bass clarinet. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, really strong score, really strong entry, Devon. And like I was saying before, I feel that you could really be, that this score could easily be prepared for some kind of performance, reading, rehearsal. It is very strong, and it's a very worthy entry in that regard. So if any of my suggestions help it get closer to that, and if you have the good fortune to be BFF with a conductor, or who knows, maybe you have a friend who is a member of a hotshot youth orchestra or community orchestra or something like that. or maybe you will be discovered by a maestro. I don't know. But I can snicker about that all I like. But those kinds of things happen all over, and I mean they've happened to me from time to time. When I was slightly too dumb to understand what was going on, what was happening to me, and then I suddenly had the opportunity, and sometimes like it was right in front of me, like the right thing to do next was right in front of me, and I didn't do the right thing. And I would say that list of blunders is much more instructive than a list of triumphs. It's the same thing like with Ravel. They asked Ravel like, hey, do you want to write a book of orchestration? We'll publish it. Asked one book publisher, and he said, well, I would be more interested in writing a book of my failures as an orchestrator. Right, because maybe he felt that would be more instructive to the reader, and also he's actually a fairly humble person. He's the kind of guy who would show up late to a premiere or a performance of one of his works, and then he would leave early. He would leave before the applause started. He wanted to make sure that they got everything right. Right, and I think the only time he really left in an embarrassing way was when Toscanini was playing Bolero Troppo Presto. He was playing it really fast. He was taking it way too fast, and Ravel left the audience in a huff, and everybody saw it. And then backstage, Ravel said the tempo is in fact marked such and such, and it's there for a reason. And Toscanini asked him, well, do performers have to be slaves to the composer? And Ravel said his very famous epithet, which is, performers are slaves. But despite that, you might think that that's very arrogant for him to say. But he was actually a really very humble person, and he learned a lot from the performers who performed his works. So and so should we all. I don't know how I got sidetracked in that, but anyways, if it is helpful to anybody out there watching this and listening to this, then great. And if not, just be assured that I'm going to wrap this up now with big thanks to Devon for such an inspired, such a well-crafted score, so much energy put into this, and and of course for the support on Patreon. That is just awesome. It really is making a huge difference in me being able to bring this kind of material to the internet at large. And think of the thousands of people who are going to learn from all of the resources that I'm able to share, and even just link resources or talk about other people's works and sort of unpack them so that people can understand them out there who are just getting a handle on how to orchestrate their own works. It means a lot, and it's a joy for me to share that, and I'm so happy that Patreon is allowing me to do that, and supporters like Devon and all the others at this level are just really doing their part. So thank you all. Thanks, Devon. Thanks to all of the subscribers and community members, and I will be coming up with another evaluation very, very soon.